Welcome back to a new crossover edition of Believe in 49ers presented by the Believe Podcast Network and Bet Online. I'm your host, Tommy Call the Third. You can follow me on Twitter at Tommy_III. That is triple I for the third. I am not with our regular co-host, Evan Giddings, today. Instead, I am with fellow Believe host, Christopher Price, who covers the New England Patriots. We're going to talk a little bit about Sunday's matchup in Santa Clara. But before we dive in with Chris, we have a quick message from our friends over at Bet Online. Bet Online is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. Bet Online has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads to bet on during the games. Think you know stuff? Get in on our $200,000 mega contest and pick 5 games against the spread every week for your chance at a weekly prize share of $200,000. When the game's over, head on over to our online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker or unwind with one of our 150 slot games. Head to the website today to get in on the action. Bet Online, the game starts here. And now we can start here. Let's get into it with Christopher. Christopher is a longtime beat reporter covering the New England Patriots for the Boston Globe, and he also hosts the Patriots Report with Chris Hogan. You can follow him on Twitter at CPriceGlobe. Chris, thank you so much for joining us this evening. I know it's a little late on the East Coast, so we appreciate you having you here, sir.
My pleasure. I really appreciate you having me on here to talk a little Patriots Niners. I think this has the potential to be a really interesting ball game on Sunday with two really compelling teams.
Yeah, it's interesting to kind of see the state of both sides, because I think if you we'll get into it, but I think if you kind of previewed this game before the season had started, seeing both of them at 1-2 right now might be a little bit of a surprise for each side. But Chris, before we get into that, I love the NFL draft, and I think when you're become so invested in the draft, you love seeing where these quarterbacks go. I liked some of the stuff the Patriots did in the draft, specifically at the top with Drake May. And I just wanted to ask you kind of before we get into it, because I know we got a little cameo from him last week on Thursday Night Football, but do you have an early opinion on him yet? Is it too early? What's kind of your just Drake May opening statement thoughts this early in the season?
I think when you look at what he did over the course of the summer, just in a vacuum, just Brissett versus May, I think Drake May outplayed Jacoby Brissett on a number of levels. However, that being said, the Patriots roster right now is not set up to support a rookie quarterback in the manner in which he should be supported. And so I think they're better off at this point playing Jacoby Brissett. I think Drake May has done very well. And I think if these circumstances were different, if they had a steady left tackle and a steady left guard and, another option in the passing game, we could very well see Drake May as the starter on this team, but they don't have a steady left tackle. Look, we're sitting here on September 26th, and they don't have a consensus left tackle on that group, on that offensive line. Mm-hmm. They don't have a number one receiver. They have a couple of, and use baseball parlance, they have a bunch of second and third starters. They don't have a really clear-cut number one pass catcher. Maybe that changes when Kendrick Bourne comes back off of PUP. Who knows at this point? The one thing that we do know about this group offensively is they can run the football. Ramondre Stevenson has had a really good start to the year, and that's a step in the right direction. If you can pair Ramondre Stevenson with a steady offensive line and a quality number one, then I think those are the first steps in getting Drake May under center. But my early inclination, I guess ultimately to answer your question, my early thoughts on Drake May is he's been very good, but they are slow playing it with him because they don't have the infrastructure in place to support a rookie quarterback right now.
I think that's smart. I think that's probably the best way to handle that current situation specifically. But another rookie that I'm intrigued by and getting kind of familiar with the Patriots, the 49ers and the Patriots, AFC versus NFC, don't get to see each other a lot. So it's interesting learning from your perspective some of who these guys are on the Patriots. Because again, they're not a team they are a young team. They're not a team we see on primetime all the time. So there are some guys that we're going to get to learn about on Sunday here in the Bay Area, at least. And I think anyone that listened to Believe in 49ers knows that I loved Jalen Polk coming out of the University of Washington. I thought he would fit Kyle Shanahan's system to a T. I liked Ricky Pearsall as well, a guy they took in the first round, but I liked Jalen Polk even better. Those are two guys that I kind of wrote about a lot, got to watch a lot at the college level. I feel like he's kind of a guy that's if the Patriots do kind of play spoiler a little bit, upset watch for the on Sunday, I think Polk could probably be heavily involved. What's your thoughts on him early in the season? Kind of quizzing you on these rookies here to start off the pod.
Yeah, he's done well. Look, he's played. He's basically, Tommy. He's acquitted himself like a guy who's been in the league 2 or 3 years, and I say that with nothing but respect and appreciation. The way he conducts interviews, the way he speaks with us, the way he goes about his business. This is a guy who is a little bit older than his years, and I think it was wise. I think you can go back and debate whether or not the Patriots should have taken a left tackle in the second round, or if they decided to go with Polk. Obviously, they ultimately decided to go with Polk, and I think Polk is going to be a key part of this offense. Down the road, if the Patriots do take some deep shots on Sunday, I don't think they're going to take a whole lot of deep shots given the state of that offensive line. But if they do take deep shots, I would look for passes to either Polk or Tyquan Thornton. Those are the two guys who can consistently really stretch the defense. And we saw that a number of times over the course of the summer. We haven't seen it so much through the first 3 games of the regular season because, again, I think they've been reticent to try and take those deep shots, those chunk plays downfield. But Polk, I think, is going to be part of their offensive game plan for an awful long time. It's just taken him a little while to get off the ground. Again, this passing game is not where it wants to be, ultimately, not where it needs to be. But when it does, he's going to play a big role in that process.
And, kind of diving more into this matchup, the 49ers heavy favorites. I think the line's currently at 10. They're the biggest favorite of the week. And at the end of the day, it's kind of, I think, rare to see 2 1-2 teams, with one team being a 10-point favorite with the same exact record. Given, the 49ers slow start, do you have any confidence in the Patriots hanging in this game? Kind of what is your initial thoughts on this matchup, and can the Patriots kind of cover that number or keep it close than that? Are they being disrespected at that 10-point number?
I think ultimately they're going to be able to keep it competitive. I don't think that the Patriots have the personnel or the gear necessary to kind of go toe-to-toe with a team like the 49ers, at least at this stage of their development. The real strength of this New England team is on the defensive side of the ball. That's going to be the group that's going to keep them competitive. And I'll put up my quote fingers here when I say competitive. And that I think this has the potential to be a one-score game. We're going to know really early on, Tommy, in this one, how the Patriots are when it comes to bouncing back. They suffered a pretty tough loss last Thursday against the Jets. They were not, it was not a great performance on either side of the ball. They, and just really get the measure of how a young team handles success and failure. They've ridden the roller coaster here through the first 3 games, really, in a lot of ways. They had that big emotional win in the opener against the Bengals on the road. They were probably 4 or 5 plays down the stretch from going to 2-0 when the Seahawks kind of stole one from them here in Foxborough. So they've really kind of, again, there have been a lot of emotional ups and downs for this team, but I think that I'm really fascinated to see if they're going to be able to bounce back. Really, when you look at this team, this Patriots team, if that Cincinnati game was an outlier and they're just kind of going to muddle around 4 or 5 wins, or if they're going to be something better than that moving forward. So I think they're, ultimately, to answer your question, I think they're going to keep it competitive, but I don't think they're going to be able to hang with the 49ers ultimately. I think this is going to be like a one-score game. Maybe they, there's a backdoor touchdown late in the fourth quarter to kind of, sneak under that 10-point level.
And kind of speaking for the 49ers side of things, I think you can kind of rinse and repeat what you just said with the 49ers to an extent. I think they are very much looking for a bounce back, because I think a lot of people in the Bay Area are kind of scratching their head with this start. Lose in arguably one of the most disappointing, underwhelming, embarrassing losses of the Kyle Shanahan era last week in Los Angeles. And now you're coming in as a 10-point favorite against a team that I think a lot of people think they should beat. And even if it is a one-score game, like you're saying, and if the Patriots are able to keep it competitive, I think that would almost raise a little bit of concern here, because I think a lot of 49er fans and people in the Bay Area think they should blast this team. They're looking for the 49ers to kind of dominate a team. They beat the Jets, that beat the Patriots, pretty handily even here in Santa Clara to start the season off. So it wouldn't surprise me if the result you're talking about would surprise some people here in the Bay Area. And I kind of done some research and trying to think. I love asking whenever we do these crossover podcasts, especially with the team we don't see very often, is like, they're kind of a matchup you're particularly excited to watch on Sunday. A 49er versus a Patriot. Is it Christian Gonzalez, I know he's a little bit banged up against maybe a Brandon Ayuk who has started very slow to through the first 3 weeks after a very dramatic offseason. Is there a matchup you're looking forward to, Christopher, on Sunday?
I think there are two of them. I think you brought up you're the first one. From what we've seen over the first three games, Christian Gonzalez is clearly going to be the number one cornerback. He's going to be the guy who's going to be, given the job of trying to slow the opposing team's number one wide receiver. And I think a Gonzalez Ayuk matchup is going to go a long way toward determining this game for the Patriots on the defensive side of the ball. I think the other side of the ball, the San Francisco pass rush against the New England offensive line, particularly on Jacoby Brissett's blind side, if they can give Brissett enough time, and we're down to a point here where we're talking about 3, 4, 5 seconds, you'd like to think that Brissett will be able to make a connection with someone. The guy who I really like is Pop Douglas, who is an undersized, not a scat back, but a really good option when it comes to moving the chains. If everything goes well for him this season, I've made the comparison before, I'll say it again. He has the potential to be kind of a Dollar General version of Tyreek Hill in that he's got that great short area quickness. He contributes on special teams. He can make guys miss. He's got tremendous straight line speed. He's got really all of the things you need to be a really talented, albeit undersized wide receiver. They did a few things last week against the Jets, trying to get him the ball in space, a lot of motion, a lot of movement, just to kind of try to jumpstart the passing game a little bit. So really for me, the two matchups I'm looking forward to are Gonzalez versus Ayuk in the San Francisco pass rush against the New England offensive line. Those are two key matchups. If you're New England, if you can win those matchups, or at least if you can kind of battle those to a draw, I think you're going to have a really good chance at keeping this thing competitive. I'm not going to say they're going to win if they win those both matchups, but I think they have a real good chance of keeping it competitive.
And I think you mentioned a really interesting name then. And I had a plan to ask you about like an underrated player, and you brought up Douglas. And I think that might scare some 49er fans coming off this loss specifically because Tutu Atwell, who's a guy that kind of, I think, profiles similarly to Douglas, if that's fair to say, just kind of really torched them and was a part of a big play that essentially lost the 49ers the game late in the fourth quarter. And so that might be an area that could be targeted, I think. And Charvarius Ward, who's the 49ers number one corner, started off the season, I think, one of his best games as a 49er against the Jets, played really well against Garrett Wilson, and then has had kind of two surprise games from him. This is a guy that's an all-pro. And so it wouldn't surprise me if the Patriots are Gerard Mayo and Jacoby Brissett try to target that big play, because the 49ers have given up. We saw the 97-yard pass in week 2 in Minnesota, and then Tutu Atwell got away with a long one against them last week. So that area wouldn't surprise me if the 49ers got hurt there. But, kind of building off that, is there a guy that like we haven't talked about that 49er fans are not familiar with, that you'd have to be kind of watching the Patriots pretty closely, that we might know who they are by the end of Sunday, or if a guy that deserves more credit, or a guy that if the Patriots are able to kind of pull off an upset as 10-point underdogs, that he would be in the middle of it, an underrated guy?
Keon White, defensive lineman, is a guy who's been really impressive over the first 3 games. He is the only member of the Patriots front seven who's shown an ability to get home in less than 4 or 5 seconds. He can rush from the inside. He can rush from the outside. He's really strong. He's fast. He's talented. In a lot of ways, his ascension made it possible for the Patriots to trade Matthew Judon. He brings a lot of the same elements to the table. He's not a one-for-one trade there because obviously Judon, a little bit older, a little bit wiser, he's been around the league a little bit longer, but Keon White is a guy who is coming on fast, and he's going to be a household name sooner rather than later. He's going to finish this year, if he stays healthy, he's going to finish this year with double-digit sacks. And so wow. I think that is just the first step in the process. We talk about guys who, in New England, there were a bunch of extensions handed out here across the board. Devon Godshaw, Jabril Peppers, Michael Wynn, Ramondre Stevenson. For my money, Keon White is going to be one of the next guys who's going to get a big payday, because I think he's poised for a really impressive 2024. I think he is going to be the guy that 49er fans are going to want to keep a really close eye on Sunday, because he is a game changer. He is a game wrecker. He is going to be someone who, if he has a great game, chances are good that the Patriots again are going to be able to keep this thing competitive.
This is why these crossover podcasts are so interesting to me, and you learn so much because mentioning the two guys you last mentioned with Pop Douglas, and we made the comparison to Atwell, who's hurt him, and then uh, the 49ers interior offensive line specifically, and honestly their offensive line as a whole has been arguably their biggest weak spot on that roster. And so if there's I think a position specifically that scares the 49er fans, it is defensive line as a whole, because it's at this point unreliable. We don't know, and it's been a spot you want to, when you talk about the 49ers, you kind of tend to avoid a little bit, because even Trent Williams has had not his best two performances to start the season, or three performances to start the season. He's been getting back in football shape still a little bit. And so it's interesting you mentioned some of these guys. And, I want to know, Christopher, we got a couple more questions here with Christopher Price on Believe in 49ers. Christopher is a beat reporter for the Boston Globe and also hosts a podcast with Believe the Patriots Report. And he is breaking down the week 4 matchup here in Santa Clara. And I want to know, what would have to happen? We've mentioned a lot of different guys and everything, but what's the script look like for a Patriots win in this game on Sunday?
I think the margin for error is next to nothing. They can't turn the ball over. They've been really good at maintaining possession through the first 3 games and not turning the ball over. I don't think Jacoby Brissett has an interception. Ramondre Stevenson has lost the handle a couple of times, but turnovers haven't been a big issue. They can't turn the ball over. They need to keep it manageable. And I'm talking, big picture, even small, kind of micro and macro here. They can't get in second and long and third and long because, again, they can't really consistently protect their quarterback when it comes to second and long and third and long and other passing downs. So they need to be able to run the ball consistently on, if that's on first down, second down, whatever the case may be. They need to set up second and short, third and short. They need to keep it, again, manageable. And then the third thing they need to do is to have some special teams magic, whether that's a blocked punt, blocked kick, return for a touchdown, whatever the case may be. They got that in the opener against the Bengals. They were able to force a takeaway on a punt, I believe. The long snapper, Joe Cardona, has 3 tackles on the season already. Their punt coverage has been really good, and they need something like that to happen. Joey Sly has been fairly consistent, had a kick block against Seattle. But they need some sort of special teams thunderbolt. Again, whether that's a block, whether that's a return for a touchdown, whatever the case may be. But that figures into the conversation as well. But really, for me, the bottom line is there's no margin for error. They can't turn the ball over. They can't afford to get behind the sticks. They can't, give up third and long situations on defense. They need to play a nearly perfect game to go on the road. And look, earlier in the year, they almost did that when they beat Cincinnati. So it's possible. We've seen that from them. So I think those are all of the things for me that would have to go into all of the ingredients when you're talking about a potential Patriots victory. A lot of those things would, or maybe all of those things would have to happen.
I just got to say, Christopher, you're probably 49er fans out there listening. You might, if they're listening to this podcast, say Saturday before the game, they might have nightmares going into Sunday, because special teams specifically has been very, very bad. I'm trying to think of a different word to describe it for the 49ers. Sorry. I mean, they gave up a blocked punt that turned into a touchdown against Minnesota. They gave up a fake punt against the Rams that later turned into points. And then ultimately their punt coverage late in the game in the fourth quarter got a 40-yard return to set up Matt Stafford at the 50-yard line to a guy's never touched the football. I think Xavier White or Xavier Smith was the name of the punt returner who returned that. So that is an area I think 49er fans specifically, and the 49ers as a whole, are probably looking at we got to clean this up. And if there's another issue on Sunday, I mean, it's going to be, wouldn't surprise me if, Kyle Shanahan's looking hard at that.
One of the things, too, that's important to take into account here is the Patriots special teams coach, Jeremy Springer, was the Rams special teams coach last year. And so you have to imagine he was watching that particularly closely. The other thing, too, for years and years, one of the truly great things about the Patriots was their ability to win games on the margins, and their ability to win, specifically when it came to special teams, whether it's, a big field goal, a big punt return, whatever the case may be. They were able to make those conversions when they needed it, and they were able to dominate in that phase of the game. The last 3 or 4 years, they've really struggled on special teams. We're seeing a bit of a resurgence this year. So I'm fascinated to see if we're going to see more of that, the stuff that we saw against Cincinnati, where They were able to really dominate on special teams, and that was a a big step in the right direction if that's going to be part of a winning formula this week for the Patriots.
Yeah, and it's funny because a lot of what you have said here today, I think, is just kind of fed right into like the weak spots of the 49ers specifically. It's almost poetic having you on here right before the game, a couple days out for the game. But before we wrap things up, and I kind of saw you post a tweet about it, and it had me thinking. I want to ask you. You've covered the Patriots for a long time. Obviously, there's a connection to Bill Belichick. The Bill Belichick sweepstakes. Just prediction time. Where will the coach land next season? Do you have an early favorite, an early prediction, just off the top of your head before we wrap things up here on this crossover podcast?
Well, I'll say this: if he comes back, I think Dallas is the one that we're all rooting for. Jerry Jones and Bill Belichick. I mean, come on,
Yeah,
that's compelling TV right there. I'd watch that. I'd put them on Hard Knocks each and every week if you could get them.
absolutely.
Um, I think that the two of them have something that the other craves. Jerry Jones has a playoff ready roster, at least theoretically, has a playoff ready roster, and could give Bill a shot at breaking Don Shula's all time wins record, which is what he really wants. He goes there for 2 years, passes Shula. He's eventually going to be passed by Andy Reid if everything goes like we think it's going to go. But I think that would be the best scenario. And then Bill has a level of gravitas at the coaching level that Jerry craves. I think, there's a legitimacy that comes with having Bill Belichick as your head coach. No offense to Mike McCarthy or Jason Garrett, but if you get Bill Belichick in there, there's a certain level, there's a certain weight that comes with a guy like that when you employ him as your head coach. Now, all that being said, each and every media job that he takes, I think, takes him further and further away from the game. I think he's really enjoying his time away, at least, by all accounts, whether it's, the Manning cast, which I think he's done a really good job with because it's conversational and kind of laid back, or, the fantasy stuff that he's doing, or any of the other ESPN projects or any of the other projects that he has. So I think if he comes back, I think the Cowboys, will be must-see TV, and I think that's the job that intrigues him the most. I think that's the job that offers him, a la Phil Jackson, kind of a playoff-ready roster. He can kind of slide right in and enjoy a level of success. He doesn't necessarily have to build a roster over the course of 2 or 3 seasons to get to where he needs to be. But again, the longer he's out of the game, man, the easier it is. Just look at guys like Bill Cowher that, you take a cushy media job for a couple of years, and you're used to, you get used to not going into the office at 4 o'clock in the morning. So we'll see, but it's certainly going to be interesting to see what he ultimately decides to do in 2025 and beyond.
Selfishly, I'm a University of Washington guy, so I know he's had a little bit of connection to the Huskies over the past handful of months, with his son obviously being the defensive coordinator there. So selfishly, if he stays out of the NFL game, it's kind of nice having him around,
Yeah.
him and Pete Carroll kind of floating around Seattle here. But Chris, thank you so much for joining us on a crossover edition of Believe in 49ers Patriots Report. You can follow Chris on Twitter, C Price Globe, for all things Patriots. And again, thank you so much. I love doing these crossovers. I always learn so much, and it's just fun to kind of get an idea of the team you're facing from, a close eye here. So thank you so much again, Chris.
Right back at you, Tommy. And again, I think it's going to be a really compelling matchup on Sunday. I think it has the potential to be a really interesting game. You love those 4 o'clock games, especially when you're watching back on the East Coast. Those there's inevitably some drama there, and I think this game has the potential to have a little bit of that drama. So I'm really looking forward to it.
I am too now, especially now I have some things to watch, and I'm a little nervous, and I was pretty confident in the 49ers chances, but now after listening to you over the last 20 minutes or so, I'm a little shaky about Sunday's game. I think that's a good place to be for the 49ers. They should be a little shaky. I mean, they're 1-2, so that record is for a reason. So
there's a sense.
We'll
I think really, and ultimately, I think when you look at both of these teams, there's a sense of urgency there with both rosters. That
absolutely.
the Patriots don't necessarily want to fall to 1-3, but the expectation is, look, they need to bounce back after that tough week. And I think the 49ers, a team with legitimate Super Bowl aspirations, I don't need to tell you that they can't afford to go to 1-3, especially in the NFC West. So it's going to be really interesting with two teams with a lot on the line going into Sunday's game.
I feel like we're going to kind of find out who I always kind of like to play like the long game when it comes to these, like that. It's hard to have, like, I'm still figuring out who the 49ers are to an extent, even with the same cast of characters being around. But I do think Sunday we'll kind of have we'll have a good idea of like who these teams are at the kind of first quarter point of the season, especially after they kind of fumbled out of the gates for both teams. Essentially, I think so.
Definitely. I'm right there with you. Tommy, it's been a
All
pleasure,
right.
my friend. Take care, and I
Thank you
hope we
so
can
much.
connect again later in the season.
Absolutely. And that's going to do it for us here on Believe in 49ers. Thank you all for listening. And thank you to our sponsor, Bet Online.